Representing people in hundreds of jury trials, Nathaniel Lee is who you want by your side in the courtroom. You've seen the rest, now hire the best. Contact Lee, Cosell, and Feigley today. And now, to address the legal concerns of the community, Praise AM 1310, 95.1 FM presents Legally Speaking. Here are today's.
Good morning, everyone. This is Nathaniel Lee. Thank you once again for joining our weekly show. And I especially like to thank all the folks I run across during the course of the week that give me guidance and ideas of things to talk about. We're a live call-in show. Our number is 833-653-3529, 833-653-3529. And also our folks up in Chicago, I got a chance to talk at length to the lieutenant governor there this week, and you should be proud of her. She it's announced that she's running for the U.S. Senate seat that's currently held by Senator Dick Durbin. So we wish her very well in her pursuit of that because she's an outstanding candidate. Now, before we get started, I have a superstar, our Marion County prosecutor today. But before I get started with him, there's one thing that when you come up to talk to me in Kroger or wherever I'm at, and this began to bug me. Folks, I keep saying this, if you have someone that's been convicted of felony, served their time, you can still vote in Indiana. I don't know why I keep getting asked this same question, but I want to put to rest. Make sure that you register and vote if you're a free person. Also, I contacted our local Democrat chair in the auditor, and the other thing is that you called in, you want to know about these postcards that you're receiving in the mail. We'll talk about that briefly today, but I received the postcard also in the mail, and what I did is nothing because I voted in every primary and general election for the last umpteen years. But I thought that if they send you a postcard and it comes back to the sender, then it probably put you on the list to try to remove you from the voter roll. And that's my thought. And I'll get some thought on this today as to, because this, in other states, we've seen a massive intent to subvert people, citizens, to suppress their right to vote. I was looking at a number of articles on this issue. And so, but here in Indianapolis, folks, we don't really have that issue. We have Democrats in control, and there's a lot of location. But I'm talking about this in 2025 because in 2026, we have an important election. We can't start thinking about this next year. I want you to start thinking about it now. Now, I have with me today our superstar prosecutor, Ryan Mears. Mr. Mears, Prosecutor Mears, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. It's great to be on the program with you, Nate. And like you, when I'm out in the public, people always talk. Every time I'm on the show, I get a lot of feedback. And so shout out to everybody in the community who comes up and says hello, who listens to us on the various stations, not only in Indianapolis, but around the country.
But first thing I want to talk to you about is that you've been prosecuted for a long time. Have you actually prosecuted someone for voter fraud here in Indianapolis for, whatever that is? I'm not really sure what voter fraud is. I thought that if you're a citizen or otherwise, you could vote. But tell me about that. Have we had any of those here in Indianapolis?
No, not only in Indianapolis, but around the rest of the state, we haven't had any cases. And just so everyone's aware, not only does the Marion County prosecutor look into this, but your local prosecutor's offices around the state, you have the U.S. Attorney's Office looking into this. You have the Secretary of State's office who has an investigative arm who looks into election integrity issues. And then you have the county clerk who's responsible for making sure that these elections are that everybody's doing the right thing in terms of making sure the right people are voting. So you literally have every branch of government looking into who's voting and when they're voting. And there's a lot of overlapping jurisdictions. There's a lot of overlapping agencies. And the net result of all of that is there's no voter fraud cases here in the state of Indiana. And I think that's a reflection of everybody working together, but it's also a reflection of the fact that there are some people who want to overstate the problem and they want to pretend like this is an issue that's impacting elections when the reality is it isn't. We don't even get allegations. We've had a number of kind of contentious elections, presidential elections. People, we're not getting anything referred to us from the election board. We're not getting anything referred to us from the county clerk. We're not getting anything referred to us from the Secretary of State's office. And to me, that indicates that if anybody's telling you this is a problem, they are not only overstating it, they are, outright lying, because we just don't see those types of cases, not only here in Marion County, but around the state.
Well, my second part of this then, and why in the heck are they sending out these postcards for a problem that doesn't exist in the first place? I mean, I got one this week, and it just irked me. I'm thinking, why would they send out a voter registration postcard to me who have never missed an election? So that tells me they send them out to everyone, but didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, well, I think we all know what they're trying to do is they're sending them out in Marion County and they're looking for addresses that bounce back. So when they send the postcard, if there's not a forwarding address, you're going to be flagged in terms of your ability to vote in the next election. And this is all done under the guise of voter integrity. But the reality is this is just another step to try to prevent people from voting. And I would be really interested to see where those postcards are being sent out. Is it in every county, or is it just primarily focused on Marion County? But you're not the only person who's come up to me and said, hey, I got this postcard. What is this all about? And what they're trying to do is identify, have people moved? Have they not provided forwarding addresses? And if that's the case, you could very likely be removed from the voter registration rolls, which impacts, people's ability to participate in democracy.
Yeah, I think when I get some time, I think I'm going to send a letter on a request for public record access to record law to find out whether or not they're sending them out to all 92 counties, or is there certain counties? Because I'd be interested in that, because it didn't make any sense to me, because it was an obvious attempt to engage in voter suppression in my mind. But the other part about this, we have a second problem, that is we just don't get enough people out to vote. I mean, I looked at the number of registered voters here in the county versus the number of people even voting in the presidential election. We see these, like in the mayor's election, we saw one candidate spend millions and millions of dollars, and, he got, 40% of the vote. But the point is, the amount of money that was spent in the election was not reflecting the number of people that voted. And what is anything being done here in Marion County? I was just curious if you're aware of it, because I also contacted Democrat Chair Eldridge to find out what we're doing to increase the voter participation in this county.
Yeah, so I was at the Washington Township Club meeting, and that was the primary focus, was how can we make sure that we're getting people at the grassroots level involved. And, it used to be the precinct committee person played a really important role in this. And I think there's going to be an emphasis on trying to reinvigorate that position for that person to kind of recruit their friends and neighbors to make sure that they're voting. One of the things that happened when we could vote anywhere is we kind of lost that sense of community, where you went to the same polling place. The people who worked at the polling place knew who you were, and they'd say, hey, Nate hasn't been here. Call him and make sure Nate votes today. We've lost that because you can vote anywhere. And, I think it's a good thing to provide people flexibility and options, because a lot of people have very small windows where they can vote, maybe before work or during their lunch hour. And so we want to make it as convenient as possible. But at the same time, we have to make sure that we are not only fighting for people's right to vote, but doing everything we can to encourage and get people out to vote. We have, really history told us in 2018, we surpassed what we thought we were going to get for an off-year election in terms of the number of people who voted, because everybody was really angry at what Trump was doing. And this was kind of their first time to respond to it. Right back in 2026, we're going to have the same thing, where there's a ton of energy and enthusiasm of people who want to voice their disapproval with what President Trump is doing and want to see new candidates. And it's a good time to really try to harness all of that energy and try to get people out to vote. When I go to community meetings in the city, I very rarely get asked about local issues. It's very much national issues. And these aren't political meetings. These are just community meetings. And people are really concerned about what we're doing with immigration enforcement. People are really concerned about the deficit. People are really concerned about the lack of respect for the rule of law that they see in some of the actions the administration is taking. And those are the things that I think can drive voter turnout. But we have to make that conscious effort, and we have to invest in trying to get people out to the polls. I can tell you there's a lot of energy and there's a lot of people paying attention to politics that probably don't ordinarily do that. But now is the time to try to get those individuals involved so we can get them to the polls and have a number that's representative of a city like Indianapolis.
Or something you just said, and I'm going to go off course here for a second. This is my opinion. I know a lot of people who are from South America and Mexico. In fact, most of the hard labor type jobs that I'm aware of, they're populated by people from foreign countries. But when I see the national media, at least what's driving this administration, they claim that these immigrants are a bunch of criminals. In my own personal knowledge of this, I just don't see that. I see people that are hardworking out there every day trying to support their family, doing the jobs that most people here in Indianapolis don't want to do. I mean, in terms of your office, do you see any statistical difference that say that people from these foreign countries out here being a bunch of criminals, or what's the situation?
No, not at all. And as you just indicated, I mean, they're part of what makes Indianapolis great is they are part of this community and have made a ton of contributions to this community, whether it's through the building trades or other industries. We wouldn't be where we are today without our immigrant community. And I think that's a good thing. And I'm really, I feel like I've got good relationships with different people in the community. And one of the things that I'm constantly reminded of is this is what makes Indianapolis great, is we have people from different walks of life who are bringing different culture, different food, different types of religions. And all of that's coming into Indianapolis, and it's making us a more diverse place. It's making us a smarter place. But it's also giving us this workforce that, quite frankly, we need. As someone who I've got 430 people who work in my office, and I can tell you over the last couple of years, it's been a struggle to fill every single position because the workforce just hasn't been where we needed it to be post-COVID. And so now is not the time to begin to remove people from the workforce who are making great contributions and making our community a better place.
Well, the other issue then is that when you talk about immigrants, each day I wake up, I see these pictures of people dressed like they're going to fight a war in Vietnam. They're wearing the type of outfit we wore when we were trained to be soldiers, go to Vietnam and places like that. And they're dressing up with these uniforms with their face covered. And I was thinking about that. I mean, you didn't even do that when you were soldiers in battles and stuff like that. But it's just a peculiar thing to me watching the arrest or them raid a place over in San Diego, for example. But the issue is ICE. What's the latest in terms of what's occurring here in Indianapolis? You're part of the law enforcement community. So what's going on with this ICE locally?
So, I mean, we're seeing ICE become very, way more active. And the biggest thing that's changed for us that has really impacted our ability to bring justice to victims is they're deporting people prior to cases being resolved. So there's a lot of victims here who have been victims of crime. The person who's accused of a crime has an immigration hold, and they're getting deported before we're ever able to give that person justice. And that's just not something that we ever saw before. To give you an example, we had an individual who was accused of child molest, where we very much wanted to prosecute that person. We very much thought it was necessary that that person go to the Department of Correction. And, now they're sitting on a beach in Tahiti. And that's, to me, you've denied that victim justice. You've denied, the people of this city, this state, their ability to hold someone accountable in order to kind of further this immigration piece. But the thing that's kind of scary to me is these deportations and also holding people. It's not just on the serious crimes; it's on way less serious charges. I mean, we are seeing people who are accused of very minor offenses being held without bond in immigration courts, and then pretty quickly thereafter deported. And, there's a lot of people who are younger who don't know their native country because they came here when they were 1 or 2, don't have family, don't have any ability to succeed in that other country. And then they're leaving behind a family. They're leaving behind a wife. They're leaving behind kids. They're leaving behind parents that they take care of, that they provide for financially. And, I just think to myself, how are we better off ripping, fathers away from their children? And how are we better off understanding that there's going to be a lot of kids who are growing up without their parents because they've been deported to a country that they didn't even know, that they didn't even recognize. And I'm talking about the less serious offenses, your theft cases, your driving cases. The consequence has been incredible in terms of you're effectively being removed from your life as a result of, a choice that you probably didn't make when you were brought here when you were 1 or 2 years old.
I'm not an immigration lawyer, and that's an area in which I know very little about. But what I thought before this year occurred is that there was a judicial process that dealt with immigrants in America. And there's a ton of immigration lawyers. And I get emails now, they're trying to recruit other people to work in this immigration field. And at this point in my career, I don't have time to really learn the immigration law. But without the knowledge of that law, I thought that they had a right to have court hearings before they're deported. Has that been eliminated?
No, they do. The challenge is that they passed the Lincoln-Riley Act earlier this year, which was one of the first things the Trump administration did. So, like, for instance, if you get arrested on a theft charge, you are going to be held without bond in immigration court, meaning you're not going to be released. Previously, individuals would be released and say, hey, come back for a court date. And the reality is it is very hard to fight an immigration case when you are in ICE custody. Oftentimes, there are language barriers that are not adequately addressed. You don't necessarily have a right to an attorney who's going to be able to represent you. And the grounds for relief in immigration are very limited. And you need an attorney who not only understands those issues, but understands your background and how you ended up in this country. And very oftentimes, it's difficult to gather the necessary documents when that person is in custody. And so the Lincoln-Riley Act really changed the dynamics of what those deportation proceedings look like and have strongly favored the government. And what they're saying is, hey, we're going to give you the hearing, but you don't have a lot of time. You're going to have to fight this while you're in custody. And a lot of people don't really have any ability to communicate with friends or family when they're in ICE custody. And so it sets up this situation where people are, fighting for their lives, but they might have been picked up in Indianapolis, but they can get shipped off to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and then they're supposed to fight the case. It's the
Yeah, I'm on the phone on hold, Paulo.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
The deck's just very much stacked against them, and I think that's been the big dramatic change under the Trump administration.
So, okay, let's go to the caller. You have a question or comment for us? You need to unmute, caller. Oh. Fred, please unmute, sir. Go ahead. Okay. I've been reading these horrific stories about what is occurring to the immigrants, right? And it maybe because of the advent of social media, it's more glaring. Maybe this has been occurring all along, but I see them seeing suspect. They're breaking out the car windows, they're dragging them out the car, and I don't quite get it in terms of the excessive use of force in these immigration cases. I'm not seeing any of the immigrants that they produce that was actually committing a crime or had deadly weapons. And I just don't understand this excessive use of force now by these immigration agents. Does the citizens lose their, rights under the Constitution? Because, well, first of all, as a result of that Lincoln-Riley Act, does that mean that they have no legal rights or no legal recourse?
No, they do. It's just the process is expedited, and they're going to do it while they're in ICE custody. And the thing is that if you get picked up in Indianapolis, you're probably not going to be held in Indiana. They're going to ship you off to another state where you don't really have access to friends and family who can help you fight the case. So you're still going to get your due process and your hearing. The reality is a lot of people just don't have the resources to prepare for it. They're in a part of the country that they're not familiar with. They're trying to hire an immigration lawyer who's maybe not even in the same state. And so it just presents a lot of logistical challenges that really taking advantage of their due process rights.
Okay, Fred, go ahead. So you have a question for us today.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Loud and clear, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, my question is this. I saw where the president, I think it's of the United States Union, Rick Snyder, visited President Trump, it said like June 5th. I'm just wondering, is that in regard to this federal policy that the president's putting out now where police officers no longer get involved in police action shooting, have to be investigated on a federal level? And I'm just curious if the prosecutor would answer that, and I'll take the call.
Wait, say, I don't understand your question. You're saying, I don't know, what do you say that the FOP met with the president?
Yeah, the FOP president, Rick Snyder, visited President Trump on June 5th. And it didn't say what he visited for, but he was there at the White House. And I'm just curious. I know that police officers no longer having to be investigated with this federal program before when they have a police action shooting. That was one of the executive orders that the president had signed. So I wasn't sure if that was in effect here for the city of Indianapolis or not.
Yeah,
I have no idea. Go ahead.
What the scope of their visit was, and I'm not sure what the president wanted to share with our local FOP president. So I'm not entirely sure what that conversation was about. I think it speaks volumes that that's who he's meeting with and that's who he's talking with when you consider all of the policies of the Trump administration and how they have adversely and negatively impacted this community directly and really impacted law enforcement. Hopefully he was saying, why are you taking away all our money? Why are you taking away our federal grants? Why are you taking away our overtime that is necessary for us to do our job? My suspicion is it wasn't about that, but certainly those are very important topics that you would think someone who represents police officers would raise.
Okay. I was just curious. Like I said, I know there is an effort when it comes to police action shootings that this federal agency that was in effect, the president has signed some executive order that says that no longer needs to be in place. So there's no way for the federal agency to, to investigate any kind of a questionable police action shooting. Thanks for the information.
And just to follow up on your question, because it's a good one, and we have a great example in Louisville, which is just south of us. What President Trump is really upset about is the consent decrees that the Department of Justice would enter into with various police departments and cities when there was a pattern of misconduct. Most recently, we saw that in Louisville after the Breonna Taylor situation, where that tragedy resulted in people being charged, but also a very lengthy Department of Justice investigation, and they kind of entered into an agreement of changes that would have to be made in order to prevent some of the tragedies that were illustrated in the report the Department of Justice issued. And Donald Trump came in and said, we're not doing consent decrees anymore. And really, there's no federal oversight now of how police departments are managed and operated, even when there's egregious violations like what was found in Louisville.
Yeah,
exactly. That's exactly what I was talking about. That's correct. Thanks for the information, sir.
Okay, the next issue is that I'm concerned about this as a citizen, Mr. Prosecutor. I wake up in the morning and I'm tired of seeing these young men shoot each other. And what are we doing locally to try to stem this violent tide? I was investigating one of my death cases, a person killed in a car crash, and I went to the coroner's office to pick up the death certificate, the coroner's investigation report. And much to my surprise, they said, Ms. Lee would like to see the facility. I said, sure. And when I walk in the facility, they have this window, of course, and they got like 18 bodies. I mean, I'm saying, what? They're covered, of course, but I was surprised at the number of cases. And I said, well, how many of these 18 cases involve people that got shot? They said about 7. Whoa. And I was concerned about that. I'm thinking that's a whole lot of folks, young folks who got shot and killed. It's maybe been a month or so ago. So what are we doing locally to try to reduce this violent trend, particularly over the summer months?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things there. Number one, it's the back end, making sure that we're winning in the courtroom, and we've got our highest murder conviction rate right now. I think we've only lost one trial this year, which was a self-defense case, and that's kind of reflective of both IMPD's devoting the necessary resources to make sure that we're building good homicide cases, and the prosecutor's office working really well with not only IMPD but the community to hold people accountable. But that's the back end. So how on the front end can we do a better job of making sure that we're being proactive? And for us, we very much see this as there's a lot of systematic issues that feed into why kids end up in these types of situations and predicaments. And so we're doing our best to try to disrupt some of those issues. And we're trying to do kind of non-traditional things that you don't typically see prosecutors' office doing to try to have those relationships with kids. We're hosting a podcast series that's actually going to drop on Monday. It got a little bit of attention because Mike Epps is going to be the first episode, who's a local comedian who's had a ton of success over in Hollywood. But the idea was we need to have real conversations with kids. And our conversation started with, why do you as a 15 and 16-year-old feel like you need to have a gun? And the answers were very surprising. I mean, what the kids told us was they're not doing it necessarily because they're in fear. They're doing it because they think it's cool. They're doing it because, hey, you never know what could happen. They're doing it because of the influence of different forces, whether it's in movies or music, that kind of glamorize and make it seem like it's the cool thing to do. That seemed to be more of the motivation. And then what happens is kids get involved in these simple disputes and everybody gets fired up and everybody becomes a lot tougher because they've got a gun. And so what we're trying to do is not only have conversations with kids about why people feel the need to have guns, but also try to build leadership and self-esteem in these kids so they can be good friends and hopefully be leaders to their peer group. So when the situation arises on their block, in their neighborhood, in their classroom, in their school, on their basketball team, that they can be the leader to help kids turn away from violence and turn away from that conflict and not pick up that gun. And so this podcast series featured kids from all over the city who had experience with firearms. We interviewed a couple kids that had actually been shot who were a part of this to talk about their experiences and everything that they've been through. And, it was really to help further this conversation about why do we even need guns in the first place. The second thing that we're really trying to be proactive is giving kids opportunity. We're doing our youth violence prevention fellowship again, which is where we take kids from all over the city who are in high school, and they help us design our programming that kids are going to have to participate in if they're involved with the criminal justice system. I'm a 44-year-old white guy. I don't necessarily always know how to communicate the best way with young people. And so we want to hear from young people what type of message would work, what would resonate with your age group, with people in your school, in your neighborhood, and they help us develop that programming. But the other part of it is, again, it's about building that leadership, teaching them about government, teaching them about what they need to do to be successful, kind of help build life skills. So when they go back to their neighborhood, when they go back to their school, they can be that leader in the community that can hopefully prevent some of these things from happening. The other thing is we're doing a lot of outreach on social media. I cannot tell you how many of these problems start on social media. It is somebody talking trash about somebody on social media, and it blows up into something that it shouldn't be. We had a high-profile incident downtown involving some kids from a local high school not too long ago where 3 people were shot. All of it started because of a social media beef. It was kids literally arguing on Instagram about stuff. And so we're doing a lot of outreach on social media education, but also helping IMPD monitor what's going on social media to see if we can be more proactive to help these kids and prevent these kids from becoming involved with gun violence. And then you just have like your regular youth outreach programming. We did our soccer camp on Thursday, which was a huge success. We're doing our basketball camp in July. We're just looking for ways to connect with young people because I've found that if we can keep young people busy and if we can give them hope, like, hey, you don't need that gun. There's a better way. There's a better alternative. Give them hope. That really goes a long way. And what we're trying to do with this podcast series is really amplify young people's voices so people in the community can hear what kids are struggling with and dealing with. When I was growing up, there was no such thing as social media. I didn't have those pressures, and it really impacts kids in a negative way. And that's what these kids are willing to share. And I think we can all learn from it to hopefully be a little bit smarter with how we're going to deal with some of these problems.
Well, here's the part I don't understand. These weapons aren't free. They're very expensive. The bullets aren't free. They're expensive also. Where do these kids get the resources to, and how they go about they're teenagers. I thought you had to be 18 years old to buy a gun. Am I right about that?
You are. It's so funny you asked that because that's what we asked during the podcast series is where are these guns coming from? And it used to be you kind of needed to know someone to figure out a way to get a gun. But the one thing the internet has done is it's really easy to get a gun. You can go on Instagram right now. You can go on Facebook Marketplace right now. You can go on any of these different apps and people will sell you a gun at a heavily discounted price because that person probably shouldn't have a gun in the first place. And so one of the things the internet has done has made firearms way more accessible than what they were even 4 or 5 years ago. And so we've got a ton of cases that are built off of these gun sales where they either turn violent, where someone ends up getting shot or killed, or just kind of the actual sale where we're able to catch people in the act and charge people. But that's a big part of it. But the second part of it is permitless carry. Everybody's walking around with a gun and not everybody's responsible with that gun. And so a lot of times people go into a grocery store, a restaurant, a bar, and they say, hey, put your gun back in your car. They do that. People see that. They break into the car and they steal the gun. And so, just the lack of responsibility amongst gun owners has created a situation where it's never been easier for kids to get their hands on guns. So as part of this podcast series, one of the things we talked about was how do you get guns? It was through the internet and it was through people, stealing them from cars or even houses sometimes.
Well, one of my concerns, speaking of the gun ownership issue, maybe you don't experience it, but I've been in restaurants, for example, and then in a more recent case, I'm in there to get a quick sandwich, and the guy comes in with a huge gun that had the magazine to have high capacity, right? So he comes in, and 2 of the customers who were white, they left. And so when I saw this guy, I was thinking to myself, maybe I need to talk to this guy, make sure he's not coming there to shoot everybody. That's what I did. I said, how you doing today, man? I was just curious. I ended up starting talking to the guy, and he was really proud to be carrying this big gun with about 100 bullets. I mean, it was just weird to me. And but I thought that it's a daunting thing for the typical citizen to see somebody with a gun with so much capacity to cause so much harm. And I finally said, do you ever consider the fact that you're a big old guy, you got a huge gun, and you got a high capacity magazine to cause mass destruction? You ever consider the fact that maybe that may make some people uneasy? He said, no, I never considered that. He said, because everybody got guns. I said, his response was, everybody got guns now.
I start most of my mornings stopping at a gas station to get a Diet Coke. And most times when I go in there, there's someone standing in there with a gun, and this is at 8:15 in the morning. And someone feels like they need to take a gun into a gas station while they're pumping gas. It's just, we've gone too far on this issue, and this idea that it makes everybody safer is just not true. And what happens is someone runs into someone at the gas station And then we have a shootout where innocent people are unnecessarily put at risk because someone bumped into somebody else. And that's what happens because everybody feels a lot tougher, a lot stronger, and a lot more bold when they have that gun on their waist. And we see it every single day with the homicides that we have. I mean, we're down to, I think we have 61 homicides right now. A year ago, we were, I think we were at 80. So we're 20 down from last year. But the ones that we're having and the ones that we're seeing are over incredibly stupid situations. And that's what's frustrating to me is people are literally losing their life over nothing at gas stations because people are fighting with one another and everybody's got a gun. And that's the part that's frustrating to me.
Well, from a legislative standpoint, what can the citizen do to reverse this tide of this so-called expansion of the Second Amendment? I thought that it made sense to me to have sensible gun legislation like background check, age. When I got my gun permit, I had to go and get fingerprinted, right? And I got the lifetime permit, but you had to go through a process where you do a criminal background check, and it makes sense to me. They ask you, do you have any mental condition? It makes sense to me. What can we do to try to stem the tide of this? Because it's not going well. And are the politicians now tone deaf to this issue? What can be done, if anything?
Well, I think we need to consistently raise the issue. And I think we need to remind people that it's not only that we don't have permitless carry, it's that there's no regulation of the sale or transfer of firearms. And that's why we have all these deals over the internet where kids end up with guns, is because we don't put any burden on the person selling the gun other than, unless it's obviously a kid, you're not going to get in trouble. There's no requirement that they show ID. There's no requirement that they verify that they're above 18 years of age. There's no requirement on criminal history. All of these different things that could help keep guns out of the hands of people that we don't want to have them are just not required. And so for me, it's not even the permitless carry. It's also this question of regulating the sale and transfer of those firearms, because too oftentimes we are seeing young people end up with these guns because they're buying them on the internet. And you know what happens? Usually when they're buying them on the internet, they're buying them from somebody who shouldn't have that gun in the first place. And so, we just have this terrible cycle that perpetuates itself where young people keep getting their hands on guns because there's no regulation of the sale or transfer of firearms.
Well, if they're open like that, we don't have any legislation. Okay, you can't, as a teenager, legally buy a beer,
right,
or wine or liquor. We don't have a similar legislation for gun ownership or sales.
Yeah, so you cannot knowingly sell to someone less than 18 years of age. So oftentimes what happens is the guy says, oh, I saw the kid, he looked like he was 18. It doesn't require you to ask for ID. It doesn't require you to ask for, how old, even say, hey, how old are you? There's no requirements at all when the gun is being sold. So unless you know for a fact that person is less than 18 years of age, you escape criminal liability, and oftentimes you escape civil liability.
Well, I don't get that. Why is it that we can easily hold somebody accountable for selling alcohol to a minor, and that same standard or the same zeal is not being used to subvert the sale of these guns to these teenagers? It seems like to me that our leaders and the state legislators could do more on this issue. If so, what should the legislation look like?
Well, there's definitely more that can be done. And, I think you bring up like alcohol and tobacco, all of those things are regulated in terms of people's ability to sell to and who they can sell to. You can put a similar framework in place. The other thing about guns, like even if you have a private sale of a car, there's some verification process that has to take place for the transfer of that title. All of those types of things could happen with guns. I mean, there's already existing framework, whether you look at how cars are sold, if you look at how alcohol and tobacco are sold, all of these frameworks already exist, and it makes sense to add firearms to it. There's a reason that ATF is called about alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, because those three things are closely regulated for very good reasons. There's no reason we couldn't expand that to include firearms. So, I mean, the infrastructure is there. There just has to be the political will to do something about it. And, the gun lobby is the most powerful lobby out there. And they have the ears of quite a few people over at the State House. And so it makes it really tough. But I don't think we can use that as an excuse to give up. We have to keep fighting. We have to keep being aggressive and highlighting these stories of where people are losing their life in these private gun sales that just shouldn't be occurring in the first place.
And is there any advice that you can offer to parents who have teenagers to try to monitor their kids in such a way to prevent them from being part of these statistics that I see too often? In other words, what advice can we give to parents, if anything, in terms of how they should monitor their children?
Be nosy. So much of this stuff happens online, and so much of this stuff is openly being posted by people. And so parents who are involved and know what their kids are doing online usually have a pretty good idea of what's going on. We've had a number of situations that were averted, meaning we had something that bad that really could have happened that didn't, because parents alerted IMPD, school police, other law enforcement organizations to step in before something really bad happened. And so when parents are proactive, but it's oftentimes parents knowing what's going on with what their kids are putting out there online, understanding what their kids are putting out there online. And then when they see those threats, when they see those conversations starting to take place, making sure law enforcement knows. We've had a lot of terrible cases that have originated from fights that have happened at school and fights that have happened on social media. And we haven't seen more of them because parents have been proactive and been helpful.
Okay, Mr. Phillip, you have a question or comment for us today, sir. Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Nathaniel Lee.
Yes, sir.
I believe these people, if they mental ill, why they gotta carry a pistol? That means they putting guns in mental illness hands without doing background checks. Now, everybody's not mental ill. If you're mental ill, you're supposed to carry a handgun. And that's why we having problems, because everybody want to keep up with the Joneses. You can't keep up with the Joneses. Now, see, if the Joneses tell you jump White River, these people might jump White River. So, I was born with my disability, and I ain't saying, but I could do things better than a normal person can. That means I can pay my bills on time. I can take care of my business. But see, we got these people saying they mental illness. Okay, mental illness no good. Well, you ain't supposed to carry no.
Vanita,
we have to feel like Pookie and Ray Ray. Because Pookie and Ray Ray might tell you do something, but it's up to you to do it. Now sometimes.
Wait a second. What about this? Hey, caller, Phillip, hold it. What do you do to prevent the people from getting the guns in? What's your idea to prevent this? What do you think they should do differently to keep the mental ill people from getting these guns? What's your idea?
Well, what you need to do, you need to check the background. Check the background. Some of these people know they ain't supposed to carry no pistol, and they say they got mental illness. Dude, give me a gun. That's what you need to do. If all these other people getting a gun, shoot, just give me a gun. I'm about to shoot. I think I can use it the right way.
Okay.
That's common sense. Everybody said he went to school, but shoot, the old preacher said, yeah, you went to school, but you didn't go to class.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Imhotep, what are your questions or comment today, sir? Go ahead. You're on mute, sir. Mr. Metcalf, you're on mute. Yes.
Okay. Hello? All right. How's that? Okay. Hello. Okay.
Yeah, you're off mute now.
Hello?
Go ahead. What's your question or comment today, sir?
Okay. How you doing, Nate?
Great.
Attorney Mears, prosecutor Mears. Thank you for taking my call. We'll be brief. Had a discussion earlier with a very astute elder, and you know, we just have a Supreme Court that seems to, you know, law is supposed to be sort of like medicine and many other things, that logic is supposed to be implied. But we don't have logic with these rulings. You just had a ruling yesterday that allowed those to just say, forget it, you can get all the Social Security numbers and all the personal information, everybody. It defies logic. They just defy logic. Going back to the D.C. decision, the Chicago decision, the last couple of decisions on guns, the assault weapons ban that you had. You know, we had great results that 10 years with the assault weapons ban, and then, you know, Bush got rid of it, and then it's been downhill ever since. You know, we have to, solutions would be, of course, starting with the youth, trying to teach them responsibility, love, and stuff like that. But when we come from a practical point of view, we've got to figure out some way to get to, I guess, maybe on the state levels, because the state's rights, that last decision, to find common sense to at least get some background checks and have a 7-day waiting period again.
Hey, wait a second, Imhotep, how do we get the guns out of these? I want to give a concrete ideas. How do we get these guns out of these teenagers' hands? What is your idea? What should we do?
What they did in Europe and a few other places when they were, when Australia had the mass shooting, I think it was in 16 or 17, and then they went and outlawed assault weapons and stuff like that. They had a massive buyback program, and they didn't give $50 and chump change for guns. They gave out big money, and people brought in their guns and got rid of them. And since then, Australia hasn't had a problem. I mean, New Zealand, I think it was New Zealand. And Australia, I think, did the same thing. They haven't had a problem. I think a massive buyback program with real dollars would help. I think that would help. But the impetus that you could pass laws about seatbelts, about cell phones, because the public good is in need of it. In need of people, you know the research from cell phones and accidents, and we know seatbelts save lives. So they pass laws for that, but then you don't look at the public good for common sense gun stuff. It defies logic. And right, Prosecutor Mears, what happened to logic with these laws? Thank you.
Well, Nate, I think Mr. Metcalf brought up a great point when we have that conversation about respect for the rule of law. And kind of the first thing that he talked about is, you know, you and I are both trial attorneys. We haven't agreed with every single thing every judge has done, but we had to respect the verdict and we had to respect the ruling. And what we're seeing from the Trump administration is there's not that respect for legal rulings. And they think that they can just ignore what is being put out there by the courts. And that is incredibly dangerous, but it's something that this administration has consistently done. And I think that's one of the greatest dangers and one of the greatest threats that we are facing as a democracy. And I don't think I'm overstating it. And it's just really concerning to me when I see people just willfully ignore court orders, and people willfully ignore, you had your day in court, you lost, which the Trump administration has lost a lot. But they're undeterred, and they've continued on with their behavior that has already been called into question by the judiciary. And that's something that I don't think we can overstate the danger that poses to our community. because one of the things that separates us from developing nations and other places around the world is we have a fair and just legal system that hopefully decides cases on the merits, and people respect the decisions that are rendered by the courts. And we just don't see that now from this administration. I think that's really concerning.
Yeah. Okay. Caller in the waiting room. Go ahead. You have a question or comment. You're on mute still. Go ahead. Cell phone caller. You need to unmute. Yes, go ahead. You have a question coming for us today. Go ahead. Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. Go ahead, ma'am.
Okay, yes. Okay, so here's something. Here's food for thought. When we talk about the gun violence with the youth, and we talk about the accessibility of firearms and weapons, we're not just looking at trying to eliminate the ease of being able to get a firearm, but I think something that we should also be doing outside of looking at some of the factors that influence a youth's thought or thinking that they need to have a firearm, because certainly we have young people that are living in neighborhoods that are not safe. And that's like that's the most natural thing to think, okay, well, I'm going to need to be able to protect myself. And okay, this is how everybody is protecting themselves. So a proposal that I had when I was teaching, and something that I did when I was in the classroom, is actually when I'm talking to young people, talking to them about the fact that they do have, as an adult, not as a youth, but as an adult, you do have a right to bear arms. You do have a right to own a firearm. Okay. You do it in the proper way. Now, we've done away with a lot of those laws, but you have that constitutional right to carry a firearm. Now, why are we not teaching young people how to be responsible? So I'm a military brat, and I learned how to use firearms, learn to respect firearms as a young person. I did grow up in this city, so I don't want a person to just assume that I did. I grew up in this city up until I was about the age of 13. Well, I left when I was 15 and went to Germany. But I learned the responsibility of that by the people who taught me, people who were veterans, or like my uncle, things like that. A lot of things, if we taught in school and we're teaching it at an early age, you don't see things like, I don't think you would see things like people just walking around with stuff. I had to tell a young man about a week ago, you might want to tuck that in. And he was just walking, had a gun just hanging out of his hoodie. And he went in the Family Dollar. Now, I wasn't judging him. I was watching him, but I didn't feel afraid of him, because I grew up in a lot of these neighborhoods and these communities. And so I understand what's happening in the community. We do need to address the issues, but we also should be educating. We should be educating young people. And that argument could go where people, in this way. When we had a rash of young people who were young pregnancies, like teen pregnancies, people were like, oh, we don't want sex ed because it's going to tell them that they should be going out and having sex. And that's the dumbest thing ever, because that's not what it's encouraging. It's encouraging them to understand how to be responsible for themselves. It's encouraging them to understand, if we're talking about firearms, to understand the weight, the gravity of what they're doing. Just like when a young person.
Hey, caller, what grade should they start teaching this in school, and why?
This should be. I think it should just be something, because of how serious it is. This should be something that we teach in early elementary school. And one of those reasons is because those are
the third grade.
Well, I'm gonna say like this. I'm gonna say first grade. You're teaching, and you're not, and it's just like if you're teaching sex education, you're not telling them, you're telling them age appropriate things. So we're not just talking about how to handle a firearm or something like that. I'm talking about even life. Like we're teaching, you're playing video games, you're sitting up there, you're playing video games and you're playing Call of Duty. See, I don't do video games, but you're playing video games and that's the only one that I can think of because my son plays it. And I asked him one day when I went in, what are you watching? And it was a video game. They are that realistic. I come from the time when we didn't have stuff like that. I mean, if I saw on Sammy Terry, if I saw somebody, some blood, it looked like ketchup, but to us, it was terrifying. It was scary. So that age of innocence is long gone. We're not living in those times. But, you know, in order to get a different result, we're going to have to think differently. We're going to have to think outside of the box. There is nothing wrong with having a firearm. What's wrong is that it is landing in the hands of children and they have no real true idea of it. For the simple fact that their brain is not even fully developed. And I said this one time, I called in on another show and said this one time, and boy, I'm telling you, I got cussed out and then I got hung up on. Yes, they know right from wrong, but do they fully understand the long-term consequences of their action? And the answer is no. And if we teach them the value, the real value, the true value of human life, that you're not playing a video game. You can't hit the reset button. That sounds like a stupid thing to say. Like a person would say, oh, well, they know that they're not playing a video game, but does the mind really understand that? That is the question that I believe we have to ask. And I know with the young people that I had and I've taught at all levels. I've been in the classroom for elementary. I've been in the classroom for middle school, and I've been in the classroom for high schools. When I talk to kids in middle and high school specifically, that had already had their mindset formed and shaped because of their environment. And I'm talking to them. Okay, now at first they're like, "Oh, she's a dang,
hey, Caller, I hate to cut you off because we're at the end of the show, and unfortunately, we have a bunch of folks that want to comment. So I'm sorry, callers. I'm at the take you next weekend. We're not going to be able to get to you folks today, but one final comment from our prosecutor before we close the show. These callers make some good points. Teaching it in school, gun safety, sound like a good idea.
That's the reality we live in. And I appreciate that caller's perspective. And it sounds like she's worked a lot with kids and understanding that a lot of kids are growing up in and around guns and they're not getting any formal education or training on how to deal with it. Maybe the schools provided.
Well, I like to thank everyone. Our callers for calling in. I apologize we couldn't get to everybody today, but join us next Saturday, and we'll continue some additional discussion on this because it sounds like this is something that we need to cover in more than one show. Folks, we have to work collectively to try to reduce this community scourge of this violent crime by some of our youth. Our local official can't just do this himself. We got to get everybody got to be on board to help out. So thank you, and I look forward to talking to you next week. Take care, everyone. Have a blessed day.